Story 1. Check the Ring camera. If it is the police or someone I know, I go to address them. If I do not know the person, I ignore it. Story 2. I can't believe anyone would actually consider answering the door. I don't even live in a bad area, but I am not answering any door at 3 a.m. Anyone who means anything to me can call or text me. I don't care if it is the police. They can leave. The only thing I will do is prepare in case someone tries to break in. Story 3. This happened. I checked my security camera. I absolutely did not answer that creep. I waited until he left. Story 4. This happened to me once when I was living alone in an apartment above my landlord's house. I was panicking, so I called my boyfriend to stay on the phone with me while I went to see who it was because they would not stop knocking. My landlord was out of town, so I had taken his dog upstairs with me for the night. This dog had been left behind by the landlord's son a few years earlier. I went to the door with the dog at my side. It was the landlord's son, and he was clearly intoxicated. He kept saying, "I just wanted to let you know I was here," repeatedly. I kept saying that I understood. Then he said, "My wife and I are having problems," which made me even more nervous. I was still on the phone with my boyfriend, but he did not seem to notice. As I tried to close the door, he put his hand on it to keep it open. His own dog growled at him. He snapped his hand back, and I closed and locked the door immediately. He talked through the door for a few minutes, and I stayed on the phone until he finally stopped. It was terrifying at first, but when his dog growled at him, I knew I would be safe. I do not miss that apartment, but I miss that dog. Callie was a good girl. Story 5. This has happened to me before. It turned out to be the police investigating a car with my stolen license plate. I spoke to them very cautiously through the door. It was extremely stressful. Story 6. Sleep through it. My wife would probably try to wake me up, and then I would get up and see what is going on. On my own, I would definitely sleep right through it. Story 7. Ignore it. Anyone knocking at that hour has no good intentions. Story 8. I checked into a motel in Barstow and went to sleep. Someone banged on my door at 1 in the morning, looking for Leon. I told them through the closed door that there was no Leon. They banged again at 2 in the morning. Different men were looking for Leon. Apparently Leon had been using this room for a couple of days. When they banged again, I jumped up, grabbed a pistol, opened the door, and yelled that there was no Leon here. 2 sheriff's deputies were also looking for Leon. I was grateful that I was white and that the gun was out of sight behind the door. Those were the longest couple of minutes of my life. I stood in my underwear, half asleep and half panicked, trying to calm down and not let them see what was in my hand. I showed up late to the meeting because I was exhausted and swore I would never stop in Barstow again. Story 9. This happened to us. Someone knocked on the topside door at 3 a.m. My wife answered and I grabbed my gun. A woman said she had a flat tire and asked to borrow a jack. My wife said no. On a weekend night, I would have gone and helped her change it. A few things did not sit right. Why would she walk down my 230-foot dark driveway instead of driving her car down it? Why walk past my front door to the topside door? A week later, the news reported a man and a woman doing exactly this. When someone comes out to help, the man waits, attacks the person, and robs them. If it had been a weekend night, the outcome might have been different. I need my beauty sleep during the week. Story 10. Either someone is delivering bad news or it is the police, which is probably bad news. Story 11. I sighed and wondered whether she was too drunk or too stupid to remember that I had told her it would be open. Story 12. I would get a weapon, tell everyone someone is at the door, and if they hear any screams to call the police. Then I would answer the door. Story 13. Check all cameras to determine how many people are outside. Call the police and stand by with a loaded firearm in case they attempt to breach the interior. Story 14. I grab my pistol and see who it is. I live very far out, so someone knocking would be highly unusual. Story 15. Ignore. If they keep at it, I will bring a gun and a flashlight. Story 16. Oh my God, I would die. That is already an eerie time. And one of my biggest fears is an unknown knock at the door. I do not know what is scarier. someone actually being on the other side, or no one at all. I have a Ring doorbell camera because of that. Story 17. Ignore it. Anyone who would be at my house at that hour has my phone number. The door stays closed for anyone else unless it is the police. Story 18. I would go downstairs with a gun in my hand and ask who it was without opening the door. Story 19. That happened to me, I said. The dogs were going nuts, so I was ready for a bad situation. I thought someone might be trying to break in, and I kind of told the man off. He said his aunt was supposed to be here and her car was parked nearby. I just told him to get out. Story 20. They knock. I glock. That's why all those kids are getting shot. Story 21. I do the same as with any other knock on the door. I ignore it and continue what I was doing. Story 22. I would look through the peephole in my door to see who was there, but I would not open it because I wanted to go back to sleep. Story 23. You are knocking at the wrong door. Try the next one. I am sleeping. Story 24. I live in an enclosed village with guards. I would call them first. Story 25. It would likely be a damaged, suspicious package with the wrong address. I would be on high alert. My alertness would be proportional to the intensity of the knocking. Story 26. It happened to me. A police officer asked about my Ring footage because a car across the street had been stolen. I had just received the Ring and had not signed up yet, so I could not help. Story 27. I poked my head out of the upstairs window. The last time it happened, a drunk woman knocked on everyone's doors on my side of the street and broke my neighbor's gatepost. Story 28. It depends on who it is. Mostly someone knocking at that time would either be causing trouble or have an emergency. If it is a family member or close friend, I would answer the door and let them in. If it is someone I do not know, I would speak to them through the door, and if they were causing trouble, I would call the police. Story 29. I'll most likely sleep through it, but if I'm awake, I'll probably just throw my blanket over my face and wait until they leave. Story 30. I am checking my phone to see if anyone has called or texted me. If not, I am going back to sleep. Story 31. That would be frightening. After seeing the comment, my husband would check the Ring app on his phone. Story 32. Check the peephole. I am in an out-of-the-way flat, so a stranger is unlikely to knock because their car broke down. The last few times we had an unexpected knock, it was because the downstairs apartment was flooding and the neighbors wanted to know if the water was coming from us. Story 33. We've had this happen twice. The first time it was some random man at about 2 a.m. I watched him on my security cameras until the police arrived. I still do not know why he was knocking on our door at that hour. The officers told him to leave and waited in their cars until they were sure he was gone. The second time it was 2 police officers. I asked them what was happening on my Ring doorbell, and they said they were investigating an elderly man at risk who had gone missing from a gas station down the road. They noticed I had security cameras, so I reviewed my footage from that time period, and he did not walk past my house. They concluded he had gone a different way. A few weeks later, I ran into one of those officers, and he told me the man had simply gotten into a different car at the gas station, and they found him sitting there a couple of hours later. I am not sure how they missed that, but I found it pretty funny. Story 34. Someone who had once done my garden came to the door at 2 in the morning to beg for money. It was the strangest thing. Story 35. Talk through the Ring camera with a phone and a gun at the ready while smelling for smoke. Story 36. Someone rang my bell at 3 a.m. once. My building has a video intercom. It was an obviously drunk woman doing a Greek dance. She stayed for over 30 minutes, ringing everyone's doorbells and occasionally returning to her dance. Then, without warning, she shrugged and ran away. Story 37. It has happened once since I have lived here. The fire department knocked and shouted, "Get out now!" Next door was on fire. There was a very loud knock. I asked, "Who is it?" The person said, "You do not have a choice, you have to open." I was standing at the door and I opened it. In general, if there are no sirens, flashing lights, or police-style knocks, I might hide. I have a small room that closes off and no one notices it. I take my cell phone in there to monitor the Ring doorbell camera and call the police if needed. If it is the police, I talk to them. Story 38. This happened to us, a family of 4, around the end of February. I heard a knock at the door because I was still awake. It was a weak knock, a light tapping. I wasn't sure I heard it until it happened again. It was kind of creepy, but I didn't have that something is wrong here feeling. We don't have any video. It's just a normal door with a window, but it was too dark to see much. I opened the door, and at first nobody was there. I heard a rustling from our azalea bush, so I called out hello. A moaning, hunched-over figure emerged from the shadows and began to speak. "Help me. I'm dying out here." I still wasn't sure what I was looking at until she stepped more into the light. She had vacant cataract eyes and wore clothes that looked like they had been expensive in the 1960s. Think Lovey Howell marooned on Skid Row instead of an island paradise. Where I live, I thought there was a 50-50 chance of drug-induced psychosis or dementia. She said she was lost and cold, that nobody would help her and she was going to die out there. I talked to the hysterical woman in my yard, called the police, and brought out some blankets. I could not invite her in because my kids are young and my wife does not trust strangers. I helped the woman who was near freezing so she would not die from the cold. Nobody else in the neighborhood came to the door or was awake to help her. We live about 3 miles from a Veterans Affairs hospital where she had been staying. The officer said she was confused and lost, and he was not sure how long she had been wandering. My wife was upset that I had answered the door in the middle of the night. If it had been the middle of the day and it had been a man holding a clipboard in a polo shirt, I would not have opened the door. Story 39. Absolute panic. Nothing good ever comes from a knock on the door after midnight. Story 40. I experienced something like this once. I lived in a small community of shanty-like dwellings at a protest camp. A man came to my door and asked whether he should choose the red square or the blue jacket. He showed nothing to indicate what he meant, so I told him to go away. A couple of days later, it turned out the man's mother had died and he had lost touch with reality. He collected everything red he could find in our sitting area and developed a mental health-related attachment to a woman he found attractive, which frightened her. He also damaged someone's caravan while searching for something imaginary. Eventually, we called his family and he returned home. I have not heard from him since. Story 41. I made sure I did not smell smoke. I live in an apartment building. The only person who knocked on my door unexpectedly was a member of the fire department. Story 42. I would be unnerved, but I would probably open my bedroom window, which is above the front door, and have a look at it. Story 43. Same as any other time of day or night. Ignore it. I ignore the police. I ignore neighbors, relatives, and friends, as they have my phone number. I ignore salespeople and delivery people. Story 44. It was a very hot afternoon in the dog days of summer. I was living in Midtown Manhattan on the first floor of a brownstone in Hell's Kitchen, 2 blocks from Times Square. If anyone wanted access to the building, they usually tried my apartment first. I always ignored it. Today was no exception. The visitor became more insistent, driven, I'm sure, by the air conditioner blasting in my window unit, clear evidence someone was home. I still ignored it until something very hard began hitting my window. Irritated, I sprang up from my computer and threw open the curtains to find 2 plainclothes detectives on the stoop. They held their badges up to the window, and it was clear the object used to hammer the glass was a gun. I buzzed them in. They looked like drowned rats from the intense heat. So I invited them to sit at my kitchen table and have some water. Just like in a movie, they showed me a picture and asked if I knew the whereabouts of the man. I said yes, he was in the morgue. Seriously, he was in the morgue because his girlfriend and family were fighting over the body. I told them the man was at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital. One asked if I would go with them to make the identification. I said the man had looked pretty bad in life. I could not imagine what he looked like now. No, thank you. So off they went and I returned to my computer. About an hour later, my buzzer rang. I ignored it. The same knock on the window, the same gun, but it was the detectives again. I buzzed them in. At my door, they said there was a problem. Problem? I asked. It was difficult to make a proper identification. The man had been dead for over a week. and with his discoloration he did not match the photo. One of them said, "We thought you could help us. It will only take a minute." Absolutely not. I started to close the door on his foot and he said, "Look, you do not even have to go anywhere. We have him right outside in the trunk." It was 110 degrees in the shade. What? No way. Then they both broke into peals of laughter. One of them had forgotten his handcuffs on my table, and they had come back for them after successfully identifying their perpetrator. Not before and not since has anyone ever pulled such a perfect practical joke on me. Story 45. 1. Grab the gun. 2. Stand at the corner of the hallway for cover, facing my door. 3. Be prepared to shoot but hope they go away. Story 46. It depends on who it is. Unless it is a close family member or my neighbor across the street, I will probably be pretty angry. Story 47. Look at my camera first to see who is there. If it is someone I do not know, inform them I am armed for both of our safety. Then ask why they are knocking on my door. If I feel they have a valid reason, such as needing help, I will help them. You can be safe and helpful regardless of the time. That being said, I would not want my daughters doing this. If someone needs help, I would rather they call emergency services at 911. Story 48. In my part of town, you would ignore it and hope nothing worse happens. Story 49. I react the same way to a knock on my door at 3 p.m. I will not answer. If I do not know you are on your way, you are not coming in or getting a response. Story 50. The door camera is on, but my wife is not letting me open the door. Story 51. We had people banging on our door at 3 a.m. on several occasions. Anyone who bangs on our door at that hour is in trouble. Once it was a friend's husband who had been kicked out by his spouse. Once it was the police to tell us our nephew had been hit by a car. And once it was the police to tell us that our 2 horses were out and one had been hit by a car and was dying. I knew it wasn't our horses because they would have had to go through 4 gates to get out. But I went with the officers to try to identify the animals. It turned out to be fairly new neighbors, and it was the 10-year-old boy's horse that needed to be put down. We don't have a crime problem, so I have no problem answering the door. Story 52. Look outside. If they are not carrying food or a package I ordered, hide and go back to sleep. Story 53. My little sister answered the door at 2 a.m. for a 16-year-old girl who may have needed help. She was shot and killed by a shooter waiting around the corner. Story 54. The children are sick with a fever or the flu. I need to help. Story 55. I arm myself and peek out the windows to see who it is. There are no flashing blue lights and no one entering. It's a rural area, so I have a clear view of the outside. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.